For joining me for the third installment of the Caregiver Connection training series. If you're watching this for the first time, I highly encourage you to stop, go back and watch the first two episodes, and do those application activities because every episode is going to introduce some new concepts and lead you to practice specific component skills. And by the time we get to the end, you're going to be able to do all those little things together and be able to teach your child to do new things. All right, so let's do a quick recap of what you should be able to do to this point, because we'll continue to practice and refine these things over time. All right, so you're able to assess some of your child's preferences, and remember, this can be anything your child likes. So, for example, I know my son loves going places. So, anytime that I need to run to the store, I just try to catch him doing something good. And I'll say, something like, "Oh, thanks for sharing your Legos with your sister. Do you wanna go to the store?" All right, and so 10 times out of 10, pretty much, he's running out the door the moment I say this. And, we go that moment because that is when reinforcement is most effective. So think about a Rolex watch to help you remember these 2 things that you need for reinforcement to be effective. It's gotta be valuable in the moment, and it's gotta be timely. So it has to happen after they do something, and the more immediately that it happens, the more effective it's gonna be. Alright, so the good stuff your child is getting, it's probably something that they're gonna get anyway, right? But you're now becoming more intentional about when they get it. So my son almost always has access to markers, keeps him engaged, keeps him busy. But I keep the Mr. Sketch markers put away and I get them out occasionally. If I see him drawing and he's sitting on his chair on his bottom and he's got all four legs on the floor, something that I want him to keep doing, I might get out those Mr. Sketch markers every once in a while and be specific about it. So as you become more intentional, you're starting to become more selective about what behavior is going to get that good stuff. And you're saving the really good stuff for their best responding. I know he likes to go to the hands on museum. It's highly valuable to my son. So I save those trips, even though we're going to go anyway. I save those trips um, for the time that I'm getting the most cooperation out of them. One, because it sets everybody up for a more successful outing. I mean, the last thing that I want to do is take someone who's struggling to follow directions at home is take them to a place where they're going to need to follow more directions. But two, he begins to make that connection between doing the positive behavior and something good following it. All right, so that leads us into today. It's all about the A. Right, so you've been able to establish this kind of connection for your child between them doing something specific, some positive behavior, and life got better for them at that moment. And that's really the nature of all humans. When something good happens after we do something, no matter whether that's something we should be doing or not, right? We learn to do those things more often. The B becomes the cause and the C becomes the effect. Because I did B, C happened. Right. But remember, it's not just B and C becoming linked together. Don't forget about the A, right? Your child's starting to make this connection that they're learning when something is of value. This is what I do to get it. The A is always there. So let's examine it. I'm going to keep things really simple. I like to avoid technical terms whenever I can, but you might be wondering otherwise, where did I get the A from? So A stands for antecedent. It means something happens before behavior. And a good way to remember that is antecedents precede behavior. The most relevant things that happen before behavior are the things that occur immediately before. And the closer in time in relation to what a person does, the more relevant it is. There can be more than one antecedent or one thing that leads to a response. But out of all those things that happen to get us to do something, motivation is arguably the most important. Motivation is a little bit hard to conceptualize because remember, it's an antecedent. We can't see it. You can only see behavior, which is a byproduct of motivation. There's also a misconception around motivation that it's something that's inside of us and you either have it or you don't. But motivation actually really isn't inside of us, it's more all around us. Motivation can lead us to doing things, but only if we're trying to get what's valuable to us in the moment. And changes in the environment can establish the value of something in the moment and therefore change our current motivation. All right, so in a little bit, I'm going to have you doing this activity. So I'm going to use this as an example. I'm going to use some of my son's current preferences across different categories in this example. So this is only, really a fraction of things that he likes, but right now, all of these things are really kind of highly and reliably valuable to him. So regardless of the category, the value is influenced by different factors. So foods and drinks are things we didn't really have to learn to value. Our preferences for those things expand and change, and the things that we might do to get food, for example, those things expand and change. But food in general, because it's related to our survival, it's valuable from the time we're born. But now the momentary value of food is going to change. It's most valuable when you haven't eaten in a while. But if you've had too much of it, it starts to lose value. Even our favorite foods can temporarily not be valuable to us. If your stomach is full, you've just eaten a whole bunch of food, or maybe even if you're not feeling well, food's not going to be really valuable to you. All right, some basic principles of motivation. Not having enough of something increases the value. It makes you more likely to do something to get it. And having too much of something decreases value. You're not going to do something to get something you don't want. And this same applies to anything we've had to learn to value. So my son, his name's Mark. He loves his iPad, but if I said, "Hey, let's go for a walk," he would set it down because the motivation would shift to walking. Now he still, loves the iPad, still valuable to him, but it is not valuable in the moment. And I know this because otherwise he wouldn't have set it down. He would have done something to continue to have it. Right? It's not valuable enough to compete with walking in that moment. But eventually, we're on a walk, he gets tired. Then the value is now not to continue to walk, but let's go home. Getting a drink becomes valuable, laying on the couch, and then the iPad may be valuable again. And the effort to respond can also influence our motivation. So if I presented $5 and I kind of stuck it out and all you had to do was reach out and take it, you probably would do that, right? But now if I changed the condition for getting the $5, I said, I have 25 trees I just brought home from Home Depot and I really need these planted. You can have this $5 if you can come over, dig these holes for me and plant these 25 trees. All right, so now all of a sudden, you probably wouldn't be motivated by the money anymore. Even if you can physically do it, it's a lot of effort. So if I said, okay, maybe $5 was a little low. How about if I up it to 5,000? Again, the condition changed. It could change the motivation. You do something effortful because the reward was worth it. All right. Now, something you wouldn't do is completely different than something you couldn't do yet or couldn't do very well. Motivation still plays a big role, but motivation doesn't teach a skill. We're getting closer and closer to having all those foundations that you're going to be able to need to teach those skills. All right, so let's pause and take what we've learned today about motivation. And I want you to think about two of your child's preferences across each of these categories. So, two foods and drinks, two items, two social, two actions, two activities. And if you're struggling to come up with at least two things for each, something you might want to consider prioritizing is teaching them to like new things so you can expand this list. When there really aren't a lot of different things that are valuable to a person, one thing might become so valuable that it's hard for the person to willingly give it up. And then it's going to pose a significant barrier to learning. All right, now take that list, no matter how many things you came up with, and identify factors that would make these things more or less valuable. So, for example, maybe your child likes a certain movie. It's going to be most valuable when they haven't watched it in a while, and least valuable probably if they just watched it. Not necessarily the case, but pretty often. And also, when they're watching a movie, popcorn is going to become more valuable. And playing on their phone is probably going to become a little less valuable. Not necessarily, but maybe. The goal of this activity is this part of the activity, I should say, is to get you to really start thinking about optimal times that you can teach something and opportunities for embedding additional practice into these motivating activities. So, if I know popcorn is likely to be valuable if I play a movie, this would be a great time to teach them to ask for popcorn. I might talk about what's going on in the movie just to model some language. And I might pause the movie to do some quick practice when motivation's really going to be high. And then I hit the play button to reinforce that practice. I'm also going to ask that you identify what your child is doing to tell you that they want one of these preferred things. Are they vocalizing, signing, using a selection system? Maybe they're leading, pointing, or maybe they don't really have any effective means of communication right now, and you're still seeing a lot of crying. So identify that behavior in those observable terms. What exactly does it look like? Are they saying ooh-ee when they want a cookie? Maybe they're signing candy when they want the iPad. Or maybe they can request what they want, but they can't do it all the time. Sometimes children can only do things under certain set of conditions. And it's important to figure out what those conditions are so we can try to help them do it across different people, places, examples, etc. All right, this is one reason why it's critical to keep an open line of communication with your child, with your child's teacher, I should say. You have the strongest learning history out of anybody that knows your child. All right, so you might have key information that other people aren't necessarily privy to because they don't interact with your child in the same way. So, for example, maybe your family eats lunch around 11 o'clock, but at school, your child eats lunch at 1 o'clock. And then every day around 11, your child starts rubbing their head against staff member's stomach, and they really can't figure out why. Okay. But you've been able to figure out through many, many years of, caregiving your child, that that they do this, and that usually tells you that they're hungry. All right. So staff knowing this key piece of information could instantly probably make your child's life a little better. And together figuring out, okay, what's a more effective way that they can communicate that they're hungry, that people will know. So in the end, working on communicating um, more effectively is going to make your child's life a lot better. All right. And as we wrap up today, looking at one aspect of what occurs before behavior, this is what I'm going to have you practice. So it's very soon going to become, excuse me, model, teach, maintain. So model, teach, or maintain. But for right now, I'm either going to have you pick one or the other. It's going to be either model or maintain. All right. So anytime your child shows motivation for something that they don't know how to ask for yet, as much as possible, you're going to give it to them, and you're going to give it to them immediately, just a little bit. And then you are going to say what you're giving them. So they like the iPad, and you say, iPad, you can have it. Okay. If they don't know how to request it yet. So this is beginning to model that response, and it's going to make it easier for them when you go to teach it. It'll be easier to learn how to communicate effectively their motivation to other people. So the more you can practice, the more opportunities to model, the easier it's going to be to teach. Keep that effort low for everyone, right? So here are the steps: motivation, move, model. So your child does something to indicate motivation. You know what those signs are. Then you're going to move it from your hands to theirs. Okay. If it's an activity or an action, just kind of think about how you're going to deliver it, and then you're going to model. So that means say what you're giving them every time. Okay. So be good, chair. Here we go. Boom. Okay. Motivation, move, model for anything that they don't know how to ask for yet. Okay. If they know how to ask for it and they're reliably and independently, and this is consistent, consistently asking for it whenever they want it, so they're motivated for it, as much as you can, you're going to honor their request. So they have something that they're motivated for, you kind of pause and wait for them to ask for it, and then you're immediately going to deliver it. This is going to help maintain what they're doing. All right. So if your child struggles with communicating in any way, you don't want to add additional things that they have to do to get it. This really might backfire and decrease their motivation to communicate. Let me say that again. This might decrease their motivation to communicate if we do this too quickly. So right here, you're just going to make it simple. We're going to start building that habit of always saying what you're delivering to model that response. The more they hear it, the more they're going to learn it. All right, so the steps for maintaining. When they want it, you wait for it. You wait for their request. You move it their way and say. When they want it, you wait for it, move it their way, and say. So, in other words, when you know they want it, you wait for their request, you deliver it immediately, and tell them what you're giving them every time. When they want it, you wait for it, move it their way, and say. So you're either practicing model or maintain. All right, we did it. We are over halfway there. Join me for episode 4 as we dive into another relevant aspect of part A. I promise you, you will not want to miss this one. I'm going to teach you how to take your child's motivation and do just one thing that is a complete game changer for teaching or improving a lot of different skills. All right, so be sure to subscribe to the Caregiver Connection YouTube channel and turn on notifications so you will not miss episode 4. See you next time.